Hey, I'm Adam Thompson. Today I want to talk about a bit of queuing theory. Might sound boring, but very insightful and useful for how things work for you and in your team. I came across this through the work of Don Reinertsen, who wrote a book called Flow, and I heard about Don through the work of Mick Fagan, who does consulting work here in Adelaide. So cheers. So here's the bit that I find interesting. I'm just going to draw up a couple of things. First, we're going to draw ourselves one of them, and imagine tossing a coin. Every time we get a head, we're going to add 1 point. Every time we get a tail, we're going to subtract 1, and we're going to see where the graph goes over time. So head, tail, 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 head, tail. Ask yourself, where will the graph end up? It turns out it doesn't end up back at the line. Counterintuitive, right? 50% chance of each. But what tends to happen is the line goes like that, or maybe goes up in that direction. And here's the reason why. If you're already at a point where you're at, say, -10, it's going to take you 10 heads in a row to get that line back up to 0. And there's not much chance of that. What's going to be required is some sort of intervention. And the intervention needs to pull it all the way back to there. Either you hit the reset button, you change the way you flip the coin, you do something different. Lesson is this: entropy. Things will fall apart if we don't actually address them. It's a natural thing to do, keeping things in control, because entropy is natural. Now I want to put in front of you the other thing that goes alongside this, which is queuing. So when I'm saying queuing, I'm talking about the amount of time something is waiting. What a great spelt word, QE. The amount of time something spends waiting to get into actual service. Just think when you're waiting to get a coffee first thing in the morning. There's the queue time on that axis, queue time. On this axis, we have got capacity. In other words, what percentage of our resources available are getting used. Let's say it's 100% here, 100% capacity. Here's the shape of the line. It goes like that. Notice that? It's an exponential line. So what this is telling us is, the more capacity we are using, the longer the queue will be in an exponential way. Why is this important? Because of the shape at this end. Now remember, if you have 100% capacity, you have 0% spare. If you are at 97.5% capacity, that means you have 2.5% spare. Here's how the maths works. And this is stuff coming into the system, just a standard sort of queue, variable queue. If we can double the amount of spare capacity, in other words, if we can go from 2.5 to 5% spare, in other words, our system is now rolling at 95% capacity. See that? 97.5 means 2.5% spare. 95% means you've got 5% spare. That's a doubling. What occurs is the queue, and here's the cool bit, actually halves. It's the nature of exponential lines, halving. So moving from 97.5 to 95% capacity halves it, and every time you double the spare capacity, you halve the queue. Halve. So to go from 5, doubling 5% spare capacity, means we go to 10% spare capacity, which would be using 90% of it. Hanging with me in terms of the numbers? 90% capacity used means we've got 10% spare. That in turn will halve it again. Obviously just representing it using the diagram. So what does this mean? Well, the bad news is, when systems start falling out, when the queue starts building, you're buggered. It's going to keep on building. But the good news is, by finding a bit of spare capacity, your queue size can halve. And that's the trick to this. Now, call centers have known this for a long time. You bring people in off the bench and that sort of stuff. Although often it's done with the mindset of this is wrong, or it shouldn't be happening, or it's a hassle. Why do we need to use those people? But the good call centers will work in a way that's natural. But think about it for your area. If your area does creative things, if it's asked to do stuff that comes in, produce some communication for me, have a look through this report, put together this design spec, it's still a queue of stuff lined up. And so the ability to call in some extra resource when required, in other words, to create some spare capacity, will have a significant drop in your queue time. And remember, all your customers, be they internal or external, they just want you to get the thing done and get it back to them. And extra capacity does not have to mean you repeat your best person. It means you find someone who is technically okay, and if that person can do some of the work you've created,